Race number 9 of season 6 of the Dark Horse Racing Series, presented by Troy Lee Designs, rolls into the southeastern United States. Good evening, everybody, and welcome here to the Homestead Miami Speedway as we're getting ready for some mile-and-a-half action here tonight. Seth Cole alongside of Matthew Rodriguez. And Matt, last week we saw some mile-and-a-half racing at Kansas, which brought about some very interesting storylines coming tonight. The win by Craig Forsyth puts him at the top of the point standings, 3 points over Rick Gravon. We saw both Gravon and Luis Gonzalez Nunez have some issues, and that's now brought Jeff Heisong into the picture. So with only 2.5 miles left here tonight and a few weeks from now at Twin Ring Motegi, what are some of these drivers now up there in the top 4, top 5 in the point standings looking as far as strategy here tonight, kind of based off what we saw last week?
Realistically, if you're Craig Forsyth, you're looking to continue momentum. You're looking just to make sure you have consistent top fives, and of course, make sure you finish ahead of Rick Gravon. Rick Gravon, though, has a much different task. He needs to go out and win, or realistically, get better finishes than Craig Forsyth, because it realistically sounds like he's going to end up missing a week, and he's going to be in an even deeper hole than he's going to be in right now. And you don't want Indianapolis to be your double points, really your saving race, because Indy is such a hard track to win at. Same goes for Jeff Heisong, where Heisong, he's kind of in that moment where he's within striking distance, but he's going to need a little bit of help. He's going to need some good runs. He's also going to need that double points race at Indy to kind of pay out, but he needs to be there at the end.
When you compare Homestead and Kansas in terms of the space allowed, especially in the corners, maybe give a little bit more of an advantage to the Homestead Miami Speedway. 11 drivers slated to roll off the grid here this evening, so with a smaller field and a little bit more room to work with, do these drivers settle in for green flag pit stop strategy from here to the checkers?
Honestly, right now, I would expect green flag pit stops. The only thing that would really throw it off would be someone who maybe ventures a little bit too close to that white line, or maybe just tries that slide job but just isn't fully clear.
Yeah, that was one thing that you were definitely pointing out in pre-race, that white line. And of course, we know that typically at the mile-and-a-half racetracks, the driver that's in the lead near the closing stage of the race wants to run as close as he can down to the bottom, force the other driver to pass him the longer way around the racetrack. So going to be a little bit nerve-wracking for that driver playing defense if it comes down to keeping those left side firestones on the right side of that white line. You saw the drivers that had taken time. The last driver to roll off the grid in 10th looks like it's going to be the 60 of Joseph Morales. He's been coming off a couple of very good runs in the last few weeks. Matt Wagner was slated to roll off 10th, but doesn't look like he got onto the grid. So 10 drivers officially going to be taking part in tonight's race here at Homestead Miami Speedway. 130 laps, 195 miles, and Eric Schaus will lead him into turn 1.
You know, Seth, let me throw you with a little bit of knowledge. At least to my knowledge, as long as I didn't overlook it, we have not raced at this track since season 4 in the Dark Horse Racing Car Series. And if you remember, the one who won that race in season 4 was Henry Bennett, only second to Nick DeGroot and Eric Schaus. Schaus has a record at this track of good, consistent finishes. Realistically, the guys who he was battling last time we were at this track, they're no longer here.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've seen Eric Schaus on the racetrack, so to your point, with the good numbers he has here at Homestead, no surprise to see him in the field here tonight, and he has checked out, obviously, as the race leader. He got control of when they accelerated, and looks like second on back were caught a little flat-footed. They're stacked up from second on back to about 7th position.
It's worth noting about Charles Teed. He had such a good run last week, and it just a lot of, I don't think we can really put it into words how many things kicked off in that race that put us in the situation we are now, where you have some drivers scrambling, you have some drivers just kind of, they're feeling a little bit more confident than they did before. You see Rick Gravon start to make a charge towards the back of Eric Peterson.
Well, the thing that really hurt Charles Teed last week and did a couple of drivers was the difficulty of getting onto that Kansas Speedway pit road. Here tonight, going to be a little bit different for some of these drivers and how they're going to have to approach green flag pit stops, and the fact that we've been told they're going to have to use that access road entering into turn 3, follow it all the way around to turn 4, and that's another thing that you were highlighting in pre-race as well. A lot of areas that you can slip up in just that short little area of racetrack.
Yeah, one of these teams were unwise enough to lend me out a car, and it took a few spins just trying to get on the pit road, and it's extremely difficult. You really have to kind of aim down the pit road. I think Rick Gravon may have caught the wall there just a little bit.
You're right.
But you really have to aim it down the pit road. About 140 is the max you can go, but as soon as you touch that grass, you are immediately going straight.
you are correct. I think the Firestones were brushing that seafoam green outside retaining wall there, as we saw it from the back of Eric Peterson in that third position. Gravon, though,
I don't see any damage on the
charging
side of that
again.
car.
No, I
No?
think it might have just been a brush. I don't think there was really any damage sustained, and obviously hasn't affected his speed as he charges to the inside of Craig Forsyth for that fourth position.
And see, this is where we start getting into that dangerous game where, yes, the fastest way around this racetrack, at least in the corners, trying to carry that momentum is arcing down almost to the white line. But if you get too close to that white line or you just barely touch it, it will shoot your car up the track. Like you see Craig Forsyth there, got a little bit too close, ended up walking up the track. It's not as long as you don't hop onto that apron, it's not a giant shot up the track, but it's enough to make the back of the car wander and you start to follow it up the racetrack. And that's fine when you're running single car, but when you're side by side, you may not have that luxury.
You know, it was interesting when you ended up bringing up the fact that Henry Bennett, a former winner here, last time these drivers were at the Homestead Miami Speedway. I got a couple of Homestead Miami nuggets here tonight for this series, and one of them is they've run in the past 3 seasons here at the Homestead Miami Speedway, seasons 2 through 4. Henry Bennett was the exception, but in seasons 2 and 3, the driver that won the Homestead Miami race went on to win the championship. DeGroot season 2, Robert Maleska III season 3.
That's it. I don't know about Eric Schaus. I don't think that trend may continue, but hey, we may have a surprise winner here tonight. I'm just seeing Jeff Highsong start clawing his way up the field.
We might have been 3 wide for a moment, were we? Because I just saw Corley. He got eaten up there all of a sudden by this pack of 3.
Jeff Highsong's getting aggressive, and that's not a bad thing, to be personally honest, where Jeff Highsong, I think we touched on it last week, where realistically he's been one of those guys who have great finishes but never anything flashy. I think this may be his kind of step to start to be flashy, because he really has to be.
Yeah,
he needs to be getting better finishes with those two in front of him.
Exactly. We said it last week. The consistency is good, but you've got to have the podium finishes to counter the victories that we've seen accomplished by Nunez, Gravon, and Forsyth. So yeah, the 18's got to turn up the wick, and so nice to see him kind of turn to a little bit more aggressive side as he's trying to reel in Rick Gravon. There's Nunez right behind him, so he's in the vicinity of those guys that he's trying to battle for this championship. Still mathematically possible with still, roughly 5 races, I think, left on the schedule.
And it's kind of funny that we kind of chat about guys getting aggressive, but we kind of often ask guys, why are you doing that? Why are you being so aggressive? One of those guys has to be Rick Gravon, where notice he's kind of chilled out a little bit this week. Hasn't been pushing as many moves. And I think realistically, at least I hope it, he's kind of looked back at his past 2 weeks where both of those instances he didn't have to put himself in. And those are the biggest killers of, those are 2 races that you could have walked away with 60, 70 plus points. And you could have had a giant gap where that one race you would have missed, it would not have affected you. I mean, that is the huge, huge hit, and I think he's just trying to get back on the momentum string of having good finishes. I think realistically a finish would be best.
Do you think that maybe positioning in points changes the driver mentality as well? Because as you were elating to the fact that the last couple of weeks saw a really aggressive Rick Gravon, that was when he was leading the points. Now he's 3 points back, kind of maybe settling in and changing the approach to this race maybe differently than what he would have if he would coming into this race still with the points lead.
Absolutely. I mean, kind of having that buffer there gives you a little bit more confidence where you say, hey, I mean, if I look at a 2 wide situation where I have a place to put my nose for 3 wide, yeah, you got that, well, if you don't go for a gap, you're not a racing driver anymore. But ignoring that, I mean, you've got a points gap. I'm a little bit more confident to put myself in risky situations, because even if I do end up wrecking or I get a less than stellar finish, I mean, at least I'll still have points. I'll still have my points lead. But at this point, he's kind of evaporated his entire points lead. Honestly, he is 3 points behind Craig Forsyth. So that kind of weighs on your mind of, hey, I had all this lead and all this lead disappeared. I need to kind of claw this back.
Eric Schaus continues to show the way, but looking at lap times here, and maybe a little bit of draft coming into play on these straightaways. I think he's within striking distance to get a whiff or 2. Noticing that Charles Teed, by thousandths, but still closing in on Eric Schaus for the race lead. That last time through 1 and 2, he actually closed it up by almost a tenth, so he really must have caught the draft there down the back straightaway.
Yeah, I'm noticing it. I didn't think draft would be, I guess really draft and dirty air would be playing this much of a factor, but Realistically, it is, and I'm just seeing kind of the big three up here. I mean, got Craig Forsyth, Rick Ravon, and Jeff Hysong. Obviously, all these three guys, they have that in my mind. They need to finish ahead of each other, but just trying to make sure that you finish ahead of the guy and not wreck the car, that is the most important thing.
You know, you take a look at our top three there. Schaus, Teed, Peterson, right now pretty much looking like mathematically, unless something amazing happens for either Teed or Peterson down this home stretch to get back into that championship battle. This kind of reminds me of playoffs for NASCAR for their three main series, where you've got different drivers, different agendas. You've got this group here with Forsyth, Gravon, Jeff Hysong, Luis Gonzalez, Nunez. They're big picture racing with the title hanging in the balance. But you look at our top three, they might be spending the rest of the season just out there trophy hunting, trying to get that first checkered flag before the season comes to a close.
I mean, realistically, when I kind of look at Eric Schaus and Charles Teed for that matter, those are two guys where I don't really see they have a huge amount of stake in this. They can easily go out every week and just say, hey, I'm going for the trophy. Because no matter what they do at the moment, they're roughly about 300 points back. Short of a miracle, you're not making up that ground. That's not going to happen. However, looking at Eric Peterson, he's still kind of on the cusp of, hey, if some of these guys have a really bad day, he can kind of claw his way back in here. Let's also not forget about Indy. I mean, even with all the bad luck Eric Peterson's had this season, the fact that he is still this close in points just shows you how hard of a fight it's been. Same thing with Luis Gonzalez Nunez. Those are two guys that they kind of need to go out with the mentality of, listen, I'm going for wins, but if I can't get a win, second place sounds good, just to get yourself back in it. And those, honestly, up to Eric Peterson, that's kind of my line of these guys can make a good charge to win this championship. Much as I love Joseph Morales here as of late, I just don't think he can really mount back the 155 points.
So I mentioned the fact I had a couple of nuggets here of this racetrack. I'm going to ask you a question here just based off some statistics from the last three Homestead races. Back in Season 3, Robert Maliska III led 57 laps. Season 4, Henry Bennett led 58. And Season 2, Nick DeGroot led 59. So does Eric Schaus lead 56 or 60 here tonight?
I think you go for the round number. 60 sounds a lot better than 56.
All right. I looked at it, didn't believe it. Could not believe that it was three consecutive numbers of laps led the last three times these drivers are here at this track. But sometimes it just works out that way.
It was also worth noting that this race is 10 laps longer than it was on Season 4, which may not seem like a huge deal, but it kind of throws a little bit of a wrench in the fuel mileage, which some of these drivers have come out and say that the fuel mileage looks to be about anywhere from about 32 to 36 laps. And that's just by running by yourself, not including any draft that might be coupled on top of that. So I anticipate we're going to see at least Eric Schaus in about lap 30-ish. But past that, I'm not sure of the rest of the field.
So go by those numbers, you're looking that even with three pit stops, Eric Schaus could be running anywhere from 2 to 3 laps short of making it to the checkered flag, especially with the fact that he's getting no draft, no opportunity to save any kind of fuel, so he'd probably be right on that minimum number of 32 laps.
It's kind of one of those things where this is a race where I'd really look towards Craig Forsyth, but honestly, Forsyth's been leading his pack the entire time, so I don't really think there's any secret to this one. I'm just kind of interested to see who pulls the rabbit out of the hat this time, but also just showing how big of a wrench that cautions could throw into this, where you get a caution the wrong time, well, hey, that changes everything.
Now, granted, track position might play a little bit into this, but you ended up having Forsyth, Ravon, Hysong, Nunez all lined up right there in 4th through 7th. They qualified in 5th through 8th, so that none of them started up inside of the podium. But we've seen Craig Forsyth do this before. He did this back at Auto Club. He did it last week at Kansas, where we thought that he couldn't make it on fuel. He's been able to figure out the exact fuel numbers, kind of work the race backwards from the end to the start. And I almost wonder if maybe Rick Gravon, Hysong, and Nunez are noticing this and saying, he must know something we don't know. Why don't we do a little monkey see, monkey do and try and follow his strategy?
Well, it's the main thing is Forsyth has gained that reputation of he's a bit sly and he's a little bit entertaining when it comes to these fuel races. So it's not a bad move to kind of look to him. But obviously, Craig has to know that these guys are looking for what he's doing and trying to figure out how to copy it, but also making sure that he's not in an advantage situation where he can kind of take advantage of them and use them for draft help.
was it Alec Coates said last week when we interviewed him? He Craiged the field. I think that's been a term that's been coined here, I guess, for the drivers or something. Might see it happen again here tonight. As this battle for the 4th position you're seeing, it's going on a little more than 2.5 seconds behind the race leader. Actually, correction, behind the next car of Eric Peterson. It's actually taking place 6 seconds behind the race leader. So Schaus, Teed, they've checked out. Peterson's just kind of running by his lonesome right now in a zip code of his own, and then you've got this pack of 5 from Forsyth back to Gary Corley.
I'm noticing just like the huge gap between Teed and Peterson. It seems like Teed kind of caught on because obviously you saw at the start where Schaus got an amazing jump. Everyone was kind of just caught sleeping, but Charles Teed was one of those guys who kind of just slowly clawed his way back up here and kind of caught the back end of my apologies, Schaus's draft. So I'm just kind of curious to see if those two are going to link up or see if Charles Teed has any other strategy in mind.
Really interesting following from the back of Craig Forsyth, looking back at Rick Gravon, Jeff Heisong and company. Kind of seems like nobody's running the same line through the corner as the car around them. Is that a case of just trying to get clean air to the nose, get the nose to turn, the car to turn through the center of the corner, or are they searching for something?
It's probably a little bit of both. Obviously, aero weight does so much to these cars where you're going to want a little bit of clean air, but also making sure that you kind of try around because this track does change a little bit. So, hey, maybe a line that didn't used to work 20 laps ago is working now.
Gravon, he's been pretty consistently trying just above that upper seam in 3 and 4. Almost gets alongside the right rear of Craig Forsyth, but can't seem to be able to get the power down, get the momentum through the center of the corner off. Gets a nice run down the straightaway, but it just kind of seems like the latter 2/3 of the corner is where he loses the ground. That inside line, the shorter way around the racetrack, prevails.
And I'm slowly looking around the track, and it's almost like you said, they just all kind of branched into their own little groups. And I'm just trying to think of the strategy here. And obviously I'm looking at Luis Gonzalez Nunez, and he's one of those guys who realistically needs a good week. He's had a couple bad weeks here, and he's just kind of fallen off the horse a little bit, needs to kind of slowly work himself back up.
Yeah, the shorter tracks have been Luis Gonzalez Nunez's friend, obviously, with his 2 victories coming at New Hampshire and then later on at the Milwaukee Mile. He'll have an opportunity at another shorter track next week when these drivers head to the Midwest at Iowa, but the bigger speedways have not really panned out the way that he's wanted them to. His luck's not been that great, and I think we got pit stops coming up here. Yeah, saw Eric Schaus way low on the back straightaway. He's going to take that access road through 3 and 4. Charles Teed following him in as well. So there you go. Car out in clean air for the entirety of that run. 35 laps looks like the max he was able to go.
And realistically, the big decider on these pit stops is, we mentioned it week in and week out, but your entry to pit road dictates how much time you gain and lose on pit road, where some of these guys who may have a better entry than you, they slowly make up seconds and they can kind of claw their way back up. So I'm looking at Rick Gravon coming to pit road, and you see Rick Gravon kind of hits me as a guy who's taking this a little bit too conservatively. But it also could be, but the fact when I was practicing, I had fresh tires, so that could be what it's divulged to at this point. Oh, he may have sped.
Really locked up that left rear.
I think he made pit road speed.
Go Mcadory in as well. We ended up having Eric Peterson, Craig Forsyth come down the same lap as Schaus and Teed, and now Jeff Heisong coming on to pit road. Could it maybe be one of the cases of you got to go slow to go fast when you're on this apron here? Because there is an opportunity you take it just a little too aggressively. And Nunez!
That's the thing is, that's what I was watching, where Nunez was really making that entrance work. And what I've noticed a lot of these guys do is really lock it up as they get close to pit road line. It's kind of caught me out when I was practicing a little bit of it really just appearing out of nowhere, and you have to slow down to 50 from going about 120, 130. But also adding in the additional difficulty of having a guy in front of you but has a different braking point.
Let's remind everybody, too, pit road speed 50 miles per hour, but it doesn't start until you get to that yellow line at the beginning of pit road. You can carry as much speed as you want to on that access road through 3 and 4, but you carry too much speed, get those right side tires off in the grass, and there's no grip in that grass whatsoever.
Yeah, it's really how brave are you, and that really dictates the entire strategy. I was watching Craig Forsyth go around the high side of Jeff Heisong. kind of watching the different fuel strategies play out here. So everyone should just kind of cycle back out. Notice Charles Teed kind of fell off a little bit from Eric Schaus, but I don't know if that was just a better exit. Same thing for Eric Peterson, Craig Forsyth. Seems like they've fallen off just a little bit.
Yeah, about 2/10 loss there.
And
Charles
they are
Teed, Eric
they're
Schaus.
2x2.
They are. They're almost 3 wide looking there off of turn number 4. This is the pack to watch right now. Look at Rick up the middle. And get in front of Jeff Hysong, cross to the inside of Craig Forsyth. Now he'll be the lead car in this 4-car pack.
If I was one of those guys, I'd back off a little bit just in case they all take each other out.
Right? At Joseph Morales back there trying to latch on to this group of 4. This is, again, the battle for the 4th position. The top 3 have kind of been on their own little islands here since the drop of the green flag. Schaus, the race leader, Teed about 0.8 of a second back, and then you drop another 3.5 seconds back before you get to the 36 of Eric Peterson. Now, I don't know if there's much in it, but it'd be interesting to kind of follow this down towards the end of the race. When these drivers came to pit road, they were running 0.4 to almost half a second slower lap times than the lap times they set on the fresh Firestone. So I don't know if necessarily they'd be looking at lap times more than they would be fuel numbers here if this race remains green, but just a little something to squirrel away.
There could always come the point where you could always try and short pit a little bit. Maybe fill up the gas tank a little bit, not take the full amount of fuel, and just hope that something works out. But I always prefer a little bit of fresh rubber instead of just fuel.
One thing that we ended up seeing drivers do last week, and it was kind of reminiscent of what we also saw them do at Michigan, we saw them do it at Auto Club, that kind of swap back and forth to kind of keep the forward momentum going and try and reel in drivers that were ahead of them. It's kind of looking like there's not that much of an opportunity to do that here. I don't know if it's maybe a lower grade of banking or maybe the higher speeds they're carrying into the corner, but I mean, you see this back and forth here by Gravon and Nunez. It looks like more like
I don't think
this is more battling for position, I think, than it is the swapping back and forth that we're used to seeing.
I think it's more or less, hey, I'm just faster than you and I want to pass you.
Forsyth and Hysong, they were doing it looked like for a brief moment there as well, but again, didn't really look like they were doing the swapping back and forth of position either, as Forsyth right down there close to that white line trying to close in on this battle between Nunez and Gravon for the 4th position. As we move back up to the front, a little bit faster lap time, that time for the 50 of Charles Teed. Now, we saw him come to pit road the same lap as Eric Schaus, but one thing that I observed was the 50 was running in 6th gear. You were talking about not a whole lot in between 5th and 6th gear in terms of the gear ratio, but 6th gear, more commonly known as a draft gear, so could Charles Teed, maybe if he's got enough draft here off the 72, could he maybe be trying to save a lap or two here each run to try and stretch it a little bit further than Eric Schaus if it came down to maybe just drops of fuel at the end?
That's why I'm a little bit divided, because I've looked at the setup and I did practice a little bit, and I've noticed that the RPM change from 5th to 6th gear is honestly about 200-300 RPM, which isn't that huge in the long run. Thinking that these cars probably going down the straightaway are ringing out about 11,000 RPM, 11,005 if you're running in 5th gear, maybe 11,003 if you're running in 6th. So any fuel gain is going to be very minimal, but just trying to think, maybe if I don't think you could save enough fuel.
Continue to watch this battle. It's now a 3-car battle for the 5th position. Looks like Luis Gonzalez Nunez has separated himself firmly in control of P4. Hysong now going to move into 5th, and very unsteady there. Rick Gravon machine off of turn 2 was trying to get that nose pointed straight down the straightaway, jumps back up there to the high side, trying to reel Hysong back in once again. For these guys right now back here, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, are these guys basically just kind of, this is the battle within the battle, realizing the situation of, that's the guy I've got to be. Obviously, I'd love to win this race. I'd love to play a strategy that could get me up there into that top 3. But right now, I got to keep my eyes focused on that points lead, and I've got to be aware of who my competition is here down this home stretch.
Yeah, and this is easily the big picture racing, where if I'm Rick Gravon, if I'm Craig Forsyth, even if I'm Jeff Hysong, I'm really looking at this whole race and saying, okay, I need to make it to the end on fuel, but I also need to make sure that I'm at least at or ahead of some of these guys I'm battling with. Just make sure that I'm not going to lose any ground in the championship, but they're also not going to gain any ground in the championship.
Schaus continues to lead. 50 laps completed, 80 laps to go. Of course, these drivers getting themselves prepared for the final few races of the season. Next week is going to be short track racing, and we're going to be at the Iowa Speedway, a little under a mile in length. Then we go to the mile and a quarter Worldwide Technology Raceway. Then we got an off week for Halloween, and then it'll be the final mile and a half for these drivers, and that'll be at Twin Ring Motegi. Wondering how many times I'm going to botch that name, but I mean, obviously, it kind of seems like we've scaled down with these mile and a halves in terms of banking. The further we get into the season, we had a pretty well banked mile and a half last week at Kansas. Not quite as banked here tonight at Homestead, Miami, and then not a heck of a lot of banking, especially over in 1 and 2 when we get to Motegi.
Yeah, Motegi is one of those tracks where it's deceivingly wide. You think, oh yeah, I'm going to be able to hold it 6 wide here, and I'm going to be able to just full throttle at every corner. But Motegi is one of those deceptive tracks where I think of it almost like a large Darlington in a way, where it's just, it looks like it's going to be a high banked fast track, but it's a lot of on-off throttle, just trying to manage the car and manage your tires, more or less.
Things have gotten pretty spread out now. Even the battle we saw back there for 5th has spaced out quite a bit, so these drivers settled in. Look like they're going to be getting themselves prepared for the upcoming round of green flag pit stops for the second time tonight, about 15 laps away from that. So we'll be back here to cover those in just a moment. We're going to step aside for an FRN race break, but you're not going to miss a thing. We're going to go FRN side by side. welcome you back to the Homestead Miami Speedway, race number 9 of Season 6 of the Dark Horse Racing Series, presented by Troy Lee Designs. Eric Schaus, the pole sitter, continues to lead. He's been out in front pretty much the entirety of this race. He's led all but 2 laps, and those laps were led by other drivers during the first cycle of green flag pit stops. We're about roughly 5-6 laps away from when we will be heading back to pit road for these guys, but we've been keeping focus on what was a battle for 6th position between Craig Forsyth and Rick Gravon. These guys were racing like it was the last lap.
Yeah, I've noticed, I think really the urgency is kind of set into them, because if you're looking at right now, they're both 6th, 7th place. It hasn't been the stellar race for either of them. I think they've really been playing the strategy game, but I think they're kind of deciding that they need to get ahead and they need to start working back some time here. Because, I mean, look at Luis Gonzalez Nunez. He's pulled away about 2-3 seconds from him, and he's starting to chase down Eric Peterson here.
He is indeed about half a second between Nunez and Peterson for what could possibly be a brewing battle for that final spot on the podium, right on the eve of these green flag pit stops as well. Interesting you bring up the word strategy. Talked about the fact here tonight was going to look very likely that this thing would go green the entirety of the way, and so drivers would really have to start crunching the numbers in terms of fuel. Well, Eric Schaus, the last time he went to victory lane, you got to go all the way back to April of 2021 when he pulled off that fuel strategy miracle at the tricky triangle of Poconos. So if you're looking at another driver that might be able to pull off strategy here tonight, look no further than the guy out in front.
Yeah, and realistically, that race, I know for Eric Schaus, wasn't the race that I think he was really proud to win.
Did Peterson miss pit road? I just noticed the 36 slow there.
Just looking back here. Yeah, it looks like he missed pit road just a little bit. He entered pit road about 140, just trying to hold 140 and ended up touching that grass a little bit, and he shot right back out in the track. Now, it's not a black flag. However, it would be a black flag if he had to hop in the pit road even after going outside of that.
So he's coming back down pit road this time. He'll try and make it. Looks like Joseph Morales following him in. There's Luis Gonzalez Nunez that we're focused on. He's also on pit lane in the 14.
Those are just mistakes that we talk about that he just cannot afford right now. With if this race were to end out how he was currently running, he would have had a great points haul, clawing his way back into the kind of the points conversation. But with this, it almost puts him a lap down, and he's going to be far behind the rest.
It also can't afford it in the fact that, the likelihood that a caution won't be coming out the entirety of this race. You make that mistake, there's no chance to be able to recover.
Yeah, it kind of puts you in a worse situation where you're going to have to kind of hope for
my gosh, Charles T came flying in. I thought he was going to hit the pit wall, to be honest with you.
And realistically, he's just trying to make up time. He hit that pit wall last week, I think, remember?
Yeah, he did. You're right.
So I think he's just trying to go for a repeat at the moment.
He made it onto pit road, but did he get it woed down to pit road speed? Only time will tell. Jeff Hysong stays out an extra lap. Craig Forsyth also has stayed out. Rick Gravon, Gary Corley, and Joe Mcadory. Those are the 5 we are waiting on to complete this cycle of pit stops. As you saw right there, Eric Schaus going a lap down with the 18 staying out a little bit longer. We'll see if he's going to be in pit road this time. And nope, no indication here down the back straight. Oh, now late dive onto pit road here into turn 3. So Hysong is indeed coming to pit lane.
Notice some of these drivers getting a lot bolder on entry, just having that practice. But almost all the drivers been locking it up, just trying to get pit road, just trying to maximize how much speed they're carrying.
Forsyth in, Rick Gravon is in, and Gary Corley is also on the pit road, so that should turn the race lead back over to Eric Schaus. Looks like Charles Teed was free and clear from the speeding police, and he's been able to maintain about a 6 to 7 tenths of a second gap between himself and Eric Schaus, and that's after 2 rounds of green flag pit stops. So are these guys just on equal footing, or is the 50 holding something back? Maybe not playing his hand a little too soon and waiting until it matters the most near the end of this thing?
Honestly, I think Charles Teed's holding something back where I've seen him be fast, and I've seen him be strategy, being one of those guys who kind of hates waiting, and you'd rather just go out and win the thing and lead the thing. But I think he's realizing the same thing we realized, where the fuel strategy is just not adding up here. But somebody's going to get thrown into the works, and we got to have to figure out how we have to kind of do this extra pit stop to get a little bit of gas in the car. So I think he's trying to give himself the best possibility of at least being around the draft where he can have a chance to possibly save some fuel, ride the draft a little bit, but not be at the full mercy of the race leader.
Talk about that near 17-month winless streak for Eric Schaus. Well, for Charles Teed, he's running an almost 20-month winless streak going back to January of 2021 when he took the checkered flag at the track we're going to next week, Iowa Speedway.
That's kind of a thing is, you could tell, but Charles Teed wants to win. He is hungry. He is fast. But it's just, I almost say it every time with Eric Peterson. It's just one thing after another where he's fast to begin off the race. A mistake happens in the middle of the race, and he spends the rest of the race just trying to claw himself back out of that hole. And it's 50-50 whether, hey, he ends up climbing out of that hole or he just ends up wrecking the car.
Riding on board with Charles Teed, you can see that he is in 5th gear, electing not to run in 6th gear, maybe not close enough to be able to get a whiff of draft. And been also noticing here through 3 and 4, he's been running about a half groove lower than Eric Schaus. Runs about the same identical line when they go through 1 and 2. So might be trying to find just a little bit of extra speed here, do something a little bit differently than the driver that he's looking up ahead at. We documented the troubles for Eric Peterson getting onto pit lane. That has dropped him all the way back to 7th and has now moved Luis Gonzalez Nunez in the 14 up into the 3rd position, albeit 4 seconds behind that top duo.
Still looking here through the pack. Joseph Morales, Gary Corley, we're kind of battling side by side here at the moment. Eric Peterson, even after all those pit stop woes, he is not a lap down. He is riding currently in P7, but definitely a lot of ground to kind of claw back.
Yeah, definitely would need a caution to be able to get himself back up into the top 3 where he was running pretty much the majority of this race before those pit road woes. Craig Forsyth and Rick Gravon look like they're about to rekindle that battle now for the 5th position as Gravon closes up about a car length between himself and that 27.
Looking at Rick Gravon here, and I still think that Rick Gravon and Craig Forsyth have something in the tank, but they're just not kind of showing their hands yet. But again, I could be wrong. This has just been a very uncharacteristic race out of them.
This is interesting too. Rick Gravon has led a lap. He did that back during the first round of green flag pit stop, so he's got himself a bonus point in that regard. And right now, with where these two are running in 5th and 6th position, it is a separation of 2 points. 5th place gets paid out 30 points, 6th place gets paid out 28. So right now, as things are scored, we've got a tie for the points lead.
It's kind of that funny thing where they're so close in points that one of these races really matter. It just, you got to keep in the back of your head that Craig Forsyth probably is going to miss a race for the rest of his season, but Rick Gravon, he's got higher stakes here. He really has to kind of go after this.
A good point with the fact that we know that Rick is going to be missing race in a couple of weeks. Craig Forsyth has, up to this point, made all the starts this year. And one thing that we should actually document as well, we were talking with Dark Horse Racing admins last week, and we found out that there actually are no drop weeks. We were hitting home the drop week scenario and everything for Nunez, for Forsyth, for Gravon, and then we found out, oh wait, nope, there's no drop weeks apparently. So throw everything we told you last week in that regard out the window.
That's the big thing where not having those drop weeks, that makes it a lot more difficult, but at least it makes the picture a lot clearer for some of these drivers where there's no question about where you're going to be at the end of the season because the points are the exact same. But just trying to math out how you pretty much your path to victory. And I'm sure when we come in the Indy, we're going to have a lot of the paths to victory of, hey, this is how this guy wins the championship, but he has to finish here, and this guy has to do this. That's going to be a lot of it, but kind of sitting here and crossing your fingers and hoping for the best. It's going to be a nail biter, to say the least.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up that fact about, does the drop week kind of muddy the waters for drivers that are strategizing week after week? Because then they have to kind of maybe take that into account in how they approach the driver that they're racing. Maybe have to try and go out and do a little bit of elective math to figure out where do I need to be in regards to this driver. Instead, as you said, have a more clearer picture without having the drop week involved as far as what the point situation is.
Realistically, kind of breaking down the two biggest opponents here has to be Rick Gravon and Craig Forsyth. Rick is fast wherever he goes. He puts in a lot of practice time, and he has a lot of knowledge in this car, which makes him equally dangerous, but his real flaws come from just pushing when he probably doesn't need to push. And that's part of what makes him so good, is that he's always pushing, but it also turns into a weakness when you look at it saying, hey, well, he gets himself into some situations that he doesn't need to get himself into. Going at Greg Forsyth, I mean, he's one of those guys that he's kind of silent and scary, where he can be fast on certain weeks, but there is some weeks where he just doesn't look to have that same speed. But strategy-wise, he is always there. He always seems to be a threat. Especially any track we go to that's strategy-based, he is always a factor. But that makes him such a difficult opponent, because he may look like he's having a bad week, but, hey, at the end of the race, he'll be there at the end. But realistically, Craig Forsyth's biggest weakness is just not being good at some tracks. Where Rick Gravon, every track he goes to, he brings immense speed. Craig Forsyth, even despite all the good finishes, he just hasn't had that overwhelming pace.
So it does not look like, just based off the calculations right now, that we would be having a fuel strategy race. Eric Schaus and most of the drivers up here inside of the top 5, they've been coming to pit road about every 35 laps. Last time that Schaus was on pit road, completion of lap 70. So these drivers would be making their next and more than likely final pit stop around the completion of lap 105, giving them 25 to go, and that's well within that 35 lap window. So basically now pit road will probably be the deciding factor into who's going to win this race, who's going to get those last spots maybe on the podium. And it's all going to have to be about execution here. It's going to be the money stop. So we saw Charles Teed be very aggressive on pit road entry to try and close up that gap between himself and Eric Schaus. Does he have to do that again here to be able to have a shot at this race win, or does he just basically play it a little bit conservative, hope that maybe Eric Schaus will feel he's going to put the pressure on him and maybe make a mistake?
My honest opinion is I feel that Charles Teed needs to do exactly what he's been doing. The biggest time that you start getting into trouble is when you start changing your strategy, or you start overthinking some things. Right now, you've had really good success of being right on him on the pit entry. He knows that you're fast. He knows that every time we go to pit road, he's always on your bumper. So, hey, don't change it up. And just you being there makes him scared. Just because, hey, there's a guy behind me and I didn't have him behind me for the last 30 laps. That's kind of that big thing of, as long as you're there, you're always a thought in the back of his head. But again, just capitalize where you don't want to go on the pit road. Hey, Eric Schaus has a better entry than you, and you're farther behind than you were now. You're having a tough enough time trying to claw back that time, but again, pit road is really the make or break point where you can make up that time.
Don't look now, but we got ourselves a battle for third. Jeff Heisong has reeled in Luis Gonzalez Nunez, showing the wing to the inside here into turns 3 and 4. I'm not necessarily certain if Nunez maybe kind of allowed him to get up here so that way he can have a drafting partner to save a little bit of fuel, or if Heisong was just able to run him down. But regardless, Jeff Heisong here with an opportunity to maybe snipe a podium finish away from Nunez, because both of these drivers came to pit road 4 laps separate from each other. Luis Gonzalez Nunez, the first of those that was on pit lane.
I'll say, but Nunez and Heisong have a very different strategy base in my mind, where I've noticed that Luis has liked the wall. He has tried to stay up as close as possible to that outside retaining barrier, and he's really been making it work. He's kind of been taking that very top line, but a lot of drivers just won't dare to go up to. While you've got Jeff Heisong and he's running the more traditional bottom line, I think that top line is really tearing up those right side tires for Luis Gonzalez Nunez. It's fast, don't get me wrong, but I think when it's compared against the guy who has draft and also is using the bottom line effectively, I think it's kind of negating the gains that he'd get out of it.
One of the things with these Indy cars that we know for certain is they run, for the most part, on aerodynamics. That's where they get a lot of their speed, the low downforce, how low they are to the ground. You can see they're going into these corners. When you're in the box of your stock cars up there against the wall, the air kind of allows you, or almost the lack thereof, allows you to be faster around that area of the racetrack. Do these drivers in these cars feel that same sensation being as low to the ground as they are?
Yeah, and that's kind of the big feeling of, if you bottom out, I mean, these cars are not the smoothest cars in the world to drive. I mean, they're very bumpy, they're very sensitive. And the steering is extremely sharp, but kind of looking at that, I mean, once you knock the wall on these things, the steering gets knocked off. I mean, it just feels weird.
That almost looked like it could have been a brush like Rick Gravon had in the early stages of this race. It was very close. Those right side tires did that outside save for burial last time through 3 and 4, but obviously doesn't look like it's really damaged. Luis Gonzalez Nunez hasn't killed his momentum as he continues to battle here
Well, did you have
for
this on your
that third
bingo
position.
card? Did you have Jeff Heisong coming up with the P3 on your bingo card with rest of the championship contenders behind him?
I did not.
And I'm
But
noticing on
as we
Luis's
said, it has to be done. It's good to see.
card was a little bit of damage to that right side pod, that right fin that's kind of directing air. I don't really think it's affecting his car that much, but just something to keep an eye on.
Is dropping off a little bit here from Jeff Heisong, so we'll keep tabs on that. As Heisong in control of that third position for the time being. Closest battle on track still for this third spot. You've got a battle possibly brewing again between Craig Forsyth and Rick Gravon for 5th, but that's got about 8/10 separation between it. And this is the biggest lead so far tonight that Eric Schaus has had over Charles T. Mentioned the fact that for the most part, it's been between 7 to 8/10 of a second. It is now opened up to almost 1.2 seconds. I don't know if maybe getting a little bit of draft off of the 312 of Joe Mcadory up there, last car on the lead lap, might be aiding the 712 in this regard, or if he's just feeling now, I got to open up as big a gap as I can between myself and Teed so that way he can't get to my back bumper on pit road entry like he's been able to do the last couple of times.
That's a big thing where if you have your number down and you're really meeting that number and your car feels better than it does, realistically, on those few laps that you're about to enter pit road, you want to push hard. You want to use everything you have available because, again, you paid for the whole tire. You're going to use the whole tire. But also, you need to take advantage of what you have because you already know you're going to get new tires. You don't know if Charles Teed is going to follow your same strategy. So, hey, if I've got my strategy, I know I'm going to get new tires, work off of what you're going to do. Don't work off what the guy behind you might do. Work off what you're going to do. You're going to get fresh tires. You're going to have a little bit of advantage. But right now, I need to use up everything remaining out of my current tires.
Saw Eric Peterson made it onto pit road this time, and then Luis Gonzalez Nunez the following lap, giving up the 4th position to make his final stop of the evening. Gary Corley also in this lap. This is within the window that they'd be able to make it the rest of the way. As a matter of fact, the window was open about 6-7 laps ago. A lot of the drivers here electing to come down pit road at the 30 lap to go mark.
Looking here, I'm noticing. I'm really just looking at this. I'm just kind of shocked to see Craig Forsyth and Rick Gravon just struggling so much in this track. But realistically, they have been down from the get-go. I wonder if they're still trying to do fuel strategy or if it's really just kind of ride and see what you get.
Yeah, I'm with you. Really interesting to see those guys running outside of the podium, kind of uncharacteristic. And could have been, like I said, the case of maybe track position there in the early going. Or, I mean, remember, Craig Forsyth rolled off 5th. Rick Gravon rolled off in 6th. So they started out this race in dirty air, and maybe it affected their ability to move towards the front, of course, as well. The green flag pit stop splitting the field up, playing an account into that, as well as Eric Schaus is on pit road. There you see Charles Teed also on pit lane with him. Going to try and close up that gap. Look how aggressive he is. Got those left sides in the grass, locked up that left front. I think the left rear was smoking as well. He closed the gap up again. We're actually going to stay with these top two here on the money stop and see if Teed can hang with Schaus off pit road.
It's kind of surprising, but honestly, I think Teed actually could have pushed a little bit more. He kind of slowed down the pit road speed right before the line and actually could have pushed just a little bit more. I don't know if Schaus would have appreciated that, but
Both drivers hit their stall at the exact same time. 7.9 for Schaus, 8.1 for Teed. Look at Teed launch there off of pit road.
I mean, Teed knows this is his really go time. He has to be there. Because realistically, this is your run to the end, minus any cautions. This is how you're going to be making up your time. See, Joe Mcadory. I haven't talked about him much this race.
Yeah, Mcadory getting one of his 2 laps back, I believe, right there. He was about to get lapped before the leaders caught up to
him. But look at this. This is going to throw a wrench in it because...
It is.
Let's say it's taken away the line that Schaus wants to run, but Charles Teed, he got the full advantage of it.
And he's going to keep in touch here, it looks like. Clears off of Mcadory, and he is right there, about a car length and a half. sending it into turn 3, trying to get around Eric Schaus. Should mention Jeff Heisong. He is hit pit road. He stayed out an extra lap, so give him a bonus point. I think he's led a couple of laps here tonight on the green flag pit stop cycles, but look at Eric Schaus trying to move back and forth, trying to cut the draft back to the 50 car.
And it might be working, to be perfectly honest. It looks like he's dropped back just a little bit, trying to deal with all that. That's it. I'm personally divided in that where I'm used, again, I'm big body stock car guy. I'm used to big body stock cars where, hey, you can weave all you want, but I'm faster in a straight line than you. But with these Indy cars, it's a lot more aerodynamic dependent. It's a lot more draft dependent. You can gain a lot more time by following the draft the guy ahead of you.
So we saw Charles Teed very aggressive on pit road, just what he needed to do, kept in touch with Eric Schaus. From this point on now, if you're that 50 car, what do you do? Because we saw Rick Gravon, Luis Gonzalez, Nunez, they went up there against the wall, got some great runs off the corner down the straightaway. If you're T, do you have to kind of run the risk of migrating your way up there towards that wall, see if you can make up time in the 72 that way? Because I kind of think that just running in his draft is going to upset your car more than anything.
Yeah, realistically, I think you really need to start searching around for different lines. But obviously, hey, explore within reason. Don't just drive up 2 lanes up a track because you think it's going to work. Look at what he's doing in front of you. Just figure out, hey, if I go a little bit lower here, maybe if I go a little bit higher in the corner, is that going to have a different effect on my car? Will I be able to still drive away? But also not over-analyzing your relative, where you're looking at the time, you're saying, okay, well, hey, he's driving away, 0.7 seconds per lap. How can I prevent this? Don't look at every corner saying, well, I fell back 0.1 on that corner. What can I do differently? Run your race. Focus on one corner at a time, one lap at a time.
On this time by at the line, 25.596, almost a 26 flat for Eric Schaus, and you can see the telemetry there on the steering wheel for Charles T, 25.714. So he is losing ground by the tenths here. Big run there through 3 and 4. Oh, really wide. Look at him there trying to gather that thing back up, as that back end was almost into the outside wall off of turn 4. He's basically asking everything he can out of this race car, and maybe a little more than that.
I'm seeing Rick Gravon and Craig Forsyth here at the back of the pack. They are still battling, and they really are just trying to make sure that they stay within close points to one another. Because again, this is realistically their championship lead here.
We have gone the entirety of this race without a caution, and this could be the yellow flag of the night if these two make contact. They have really mixed it up here.
Punches.
Exactly. I mean, they've been mixing it up back here. Even though it's a battle for the 5th position, it's almost like it's a battle for the race win, which in their minds could be the case. It's really a battle for the points lead between the two heading into Iowa.
I said this is huge for them, where, again, Craig Forsyth has in his mind where he doesn't need to be flashy, he doesn't need to go out and win races. He just needs to keep doing what he's doing, keep being consistent. But also, the big thing in being consistent is make sure you finish ahead of Rick Gravon. Because, again, just finishing 1 place behind him, 5th place points is better than 6th place points, even if by a small margin.
You mentioned about Jeff Heisong, 84 points out of the points lead coming into tonight's race. 3rd in the overall standings. We saw last week him get his first podium of the season, and right now he's in line to maybe have back-to-back podiums. Luis Gonzalez Nunez bearing down on him to try and get that spot. But I think the most impressive stat here tonight for Jeff Heisong is the fact that we've run now 115 laps under green. We've seen it be rather difficult to pass for position, but Jeff Heisong rolled off the grid in the 8th spot. He has picked up 5 spots since the start of this race. Slowly, methodically, has worked his way up into the podium. So I think that is an incredible statistic right there for the 18. The fact that he's been able to pass as many cars as he has under these green flag conditions, and really off of pit strategy as well. He has stayed out, a lap or 2 longer than most of the drivers in the field tonight.
The big thing, that's what he needs. He knows he's on the cusp of the championship, but he's not overreacting to it. He's letting the race come to him. And he's also just set himself up for success. He may have not been the fastest car tonight. He may have not been the best car on strategy tonight, but at least he was one of the most consistent cars. He hasn't made any mistakes, and he's had the right strategy at the right time. He's been able to capitalize on what he's been given.
This battle is going to be a lot of fun to watch here in the closing stages between Rick Gravon and Craig Forsyth. Again, as they run right now, with Gravon having led a lap and Forsyth has not been out in front yet tonight, points payout would have these two drivers tied for the points lead at the top of the standings heading into Iowa next week. Up at the front, though, it continues to be that bright green livery of Eric Schaus. He started on the pole. He's led the most laps here tonight. As a matter of fact, remember I asked you that question of would he lead a 56 or 60? I think he's eclipsed that. He's led over 100 laps here tonight. He's probably led all but 5 or 6 laps of the entirety of this thing. And barring any issues here, maybe a late race caution, he is en route for what would be his first win of Season 6.
That's the big thing. He's looking at this here and saying, hey, this is something that can help him at least feel better about his season. It's not going to help him get back in this championship fight, but at least, hey, it's been a rough season. Just a little bit will make you feel better. Plus, again, a win will kind of catapult you on the standings just a little bit. It's not going to be a huge championship thing, but it'll just be kind of a morale thing. Same thing for Charles Tito. He just needs a good finish where even if he can't get the win, he is just looking for a good finish just to rebound.
Obviously, a driver wants to win the big one. They want to hoist that championship trophy at season's end, but when it's looking like it's mathematically impossible, does it take a little bit of a load off a driver's mind that they can just go out there and hunt for trophies, hunt for checkered flags?
I mean, no one likes being told, hey, it looks like you're not going to fight for the championship this year. But again, fighting for trophies, that just kind of gives you a, listen, if you wreck, you wreck. It's one of those bring me the steering wheel, bring me the trophy moments where either go out there and bring me a trophy or just wreck trying. And that's, I don't think that's Charles T's mentality because he's wrecked a lot this season. But just having that mentality of, listen, I'm out of the championship fight. I can't get there. No matter what I do, short of a miracle, it's going to be my claw back. But at least I can possibly go try and win this race, and I can make myself feel better saying, hey, I mean, I may have not done this well this season, but at least I was fighting here for wins. So,
well, we know there are gators in Florida. I guarantee you here tonight there are snakes, and they are on the straightaways of this racetrack. This battle for 5th place continues on, and these guys, Forsyth and Gravon, they were snaking in every sense of the word a couple of laps ago down both the front and back straightaway. Forsyth able to get the slipstream, able to get the launch past Gravon for that 5th position, but Gravon might just be winding up that rubber band to try again. This thing is still not over between these two, coming to 5 to go this next time by.
Yeah, realistically, he's just trying to get there. He's trying to get his nose there. A point's a point. That's the biggest thing.
And the difference between these two is if Gravon gets 5th, these two would be tied. If Forsyth gets the 5th position, then it would be 1 point advantage to Craig Forsyth going into Iowa. And there you see the gap closed up. No snaking down the front straightaway this time. Gravon, he wanted, I think, the top side. And Craig Forsyth took that lane from him. Gravon had to get on the brakes a little bit there going into turn 1, so that lost him some momentum.
I think the big thing that you have to remember, and this is something I cannot stress enough, don't wreck the car.
Right.
Even if you can't pass Craig Forsyth, don't wreck trying. Partially because, yes, you won't be in the points lead after this, but at least you'll be near the points lead. It won't be as big as a gap, but if you wreck the car, you're finishing probably about P9, P10.
Exactly. There right now are 8 cars on the lead lap.
It's not worth the risk.
And also the fact that we don't have any overtime cautions or overtime restarts. I mean, obviously, nobody here tonight has had to use a fast repair. Actually, one driver did. That was Luis Gonzalez. Nunez, that would be back to that rear wing damage you alluded to around the midway portion of the race. But nobody else has had to use the fast repair. But you end up getting involved in a wreck here and tear that race car up with 3 to go. It's very unlikely we would get back green. The race would end under yellow, and yeah, you would drop down to 8th or 9th position in the finishing results. A far cry from the points you would gain if you brought it home inside of the top 5 or top 6 based on the running order of these two drivers. But this time around, Eric Schaus is about to see the flag he's probably been waiting for the last 50 laps or so. The white flag going to be displayed here at Homestead Miami Speedway. 1.5 miles left for car number 72.
And to be honest, Schaus has put on a masterclass here of just how to maintain the lead and control the draft of this race. And realistically, he's controlled the flow of this entire race, hasn't been interrupted once.
Execution on pit road has been flawless. Lap times have been consistent. Strategy has been perfect. Off turn 4 for the final time. Snapping a winless streak going back to April of last year. Eric Schaus is your winner here tonight at the Homestead Miami Speedway.
It doesn't look like Rick Gravon can get it done, so it'll be P5 Forsyth, P6 Gravon. That has a huge jump for Highsong being able to get up that high.
Be interesting to see what the gap's going to be points-wise between Highsong, Gravon, and Forsyth now, with Highsong bringing it home in the podium for the second straight week, by the way. He was 84 points back coming into tonight. Be interesting to see what the points gap will be going into Iowa next week, as Eric Schaus dominating clinic here tonight at Homestead, Miami, and now going to burn it down on the front straightaway here in front of these Florida fans. Don't know the exact number of laps that he led, but if I had to do a rough estimate, I would say he led probably about 114, or make that, or correction, 124 of the 130 laps here tonight. The only other drivers that took turns out in front, to my knowledge, Rick Gravon, Jeff Highsong, I know they stayed out a couple of laps under the green flag pit stops, and I think Joe Mcadory might have sniped a lap led as well. But other than that, it was the 72 crossing the line in P1 pretty much every lap of this race. And you could just see, look how long the burnout is here. The elation and maybe the relief of finally getting back to victory lane after such a long winless streak.
Yeah, and it's just those small motivations that keep you in it. And it doesn't have to be anything big, but just something to keep to kind of keep your head up and just stay motivated.
Let's take a look at our finishing results from tonight. All 10 drivers that started the race finished the race, no cautions the entirety of this 130-lap event. We did have 2 drivers finish off the lead lap. A big part of that was when the field got spread out with the green flag pit stops, but everybody finishing under their own power, and really no torn up equipment here tonight. Teed bringing it home with a solid run of second place. He closed it up there near the end. Was about little less than 7/10 of a second off of Eric Schaus, but just never seemed to be able to close it up enough to make a move. Closest he was about a car length when they came off pit road for the final time. Jeff Highsong with his second straight finish inside of the podium in third. Again, remember, did that from the 8th starting position. Luis Gonzalez Nunez had that little bit of damage, got the faster pair, and was able to maintain a 4th place run tonight. Craig Forsyth right behind him in 5th, and Rick Gravon in 6th. So the points will continue to be close between the 27 and the 1. I believe 1 point advantage for Forsyth going into next week. Eric Peterson, what might have been for the 36 if he had not had that pit road miscue around the midway portion of the race. He'll still bring it home on the lead lap in 7th. Gary Corley, last car on the lead lap in 8th. And then Joseph Morales, Joe Mcadory, 1 lap down in the 9th and 10th positions. But a relatively clean race here tonight for these drivers. Nice to see. And everybody finishing the race under their own power. Again, really nobody had to use a faster pair outside of Nunez. And that wasn't even really damage repair that was something that was going to take him out of the race, just something to keep him a little bit more aerodynamically sound, give him a little bit extra speed.
And just look at this. I mean, Highsong has top 3s back to back. That is just huge momentum for him, especially on a night where his other championship contenders just weren't there.
And we will hopefully be able to talk with him and the other top 3 finishers. I believe actually we do have Jeff Highsong on standby here. So let's talk with the guy that brings it home for the second straight week in the 3rd position. Jeff, it's Matt and Seth up here in the FRM booth. You got us?
Yeah, what's going on, guys?
I'll tell you what, in terms of lap times and in terms of who had the fastest car on the long run, I think we look no further than car number 18. I mean, you moved your way from 8th up to 3rd place here tonight. What do you attribute that to? Was it the execution on pit road that gained you that track position? Was it just the car itself? Or was it the way you were able to approach the banking here in these corners at Homestead?
I like the setup. The setup felt great, and yeah, I just tried to save the tires on the run and keep them going for as long as I could. I noticed guys had them fall off in the first run, so that was kind of my goal, was to keep them alive throughout the run and see what I could do.
So I've got to ask, because I'm looking big picture. I see that you're slowly, again, just slowly, mind you, slowly clawing your way back up to that top 2 in points. Currently, it looks like with the current race standings, you're 75 or 78 points behind the leader, 75 points behind Ravon. I mean, with Ravon missing that race and with a double points race at the end of the season, I mean, are you dreaming a little bit, or?
I got to keep my hopes up and just think that it's a possibility. Otherwise, why go out and race? But yeah, it's a tall task and a tall order. But we'll see what we can do if we can put the car up front each race. We got a chance.
I mean, Jeff, obviously a lot of momentum, back-to-back podium finishes at the mile-and-a-half racetracks. Next week we go to Iowa, short track. So what's the confidence level there based off of having 2 good finishes here tonight?
I've always liked Iowa, so should be a good week. Hopefully we just keep it out of the wall, stay out of any danger that's there. But yeah, confidence is high going into next week, and then we just got to see what happens when we get there.
Well, Jeff, making it interesting here down the home stretch of the season. Going to be a lot of fun to see if you can close that gap up even more in the upcoming weeks. Congratulations once again here tonight on another solid podium run. And before we let you go, we'll give you the opportunity to thank some sponsors and do some shout-outs.
Thanks to you guys and all the work you guys do. It's great to watch these back again. Thanks to the family letting me do this, supporting me. Just want to give a shout out to Eric Schaus, awesome win there, and then Teed for his podium.
Jeff Heisong, P3 here tonight under the lights at the Homestead Miami Speedway. Congratulations once again. Best of luck next week as we head to the Midwest.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you next week.
It's interesting if you look at his last couple of finishes, 6th at New Hampshire, Phoenix, and then back-to-back 4ths at Michigan, Milwaukee, and then back-to-back 3rds at Kansas, and then here tonight at Homestead Miami Speedway. The driver that brings it home 2nd place here tonight, Charles Teed on standby. Charles, Matt and Seth up here in the FRM booth. You got us?
I do. How's it going, guys?
Oh man, I'll tell you what, we saw one of the areas where your strengths was the entry to pit road, the ability to be able to attack that commitment line. We saw you do it on the 2nd round of pit stops, figured you probably would do it on that last round. You had him within a car length when you left pit road. What little more did you need? Was it the dirty air to the nose that had you falling back, or was the 72 just a little bit quicker?
It was probably both. We were just talking about it. If you want, you guys can pull him in here too. We can do it together. We're just talking right now. If you want, we can do the 3 of us or the 4 of us can all chat together if you want. It's totally up to you. But
Sure.
yeah,
Am I pulling up?
yeah, pull him up.
So we're gonna get the driver down in victory lane here as well, Eric Schaus.
Yeah,
And I believe we have Eric here.
Yep. So Eric was not only faster on the track, but we would trade laps here and there. But he was a little bit quicker, and it was tough in the aero behind after you had 15 laps on the car. And then my saving grace, you hit it on the head, was I had a rabbit to follow into pit lane. So I knew however fast he was going, I could push it just a little harder and stand on the nose to go in. And he made one mistake really the whole race, which was on pit exit of that last stop with the pit limiter. But I was stuck behind him. And then we ran into traffic right out onto the track, which I think was super unfortunate. With those new tires, you have about 4 or 5 laps where you can really get after it. And then after that, it was follow the leader. He drove fantastic, though. Congratulations, Eric.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, Teed pushed me the whole race. That was not easy. My hand was cramping up there near the end. He was every time I think I would get a gap on him, he'd pull it back in, or near the end of a run, I might get a second on him. But then, like you said, just pulling into the pits, he took that full advantage of that because I couldn't push like he could, and he brought everything back every time. And then with that little error coming out of the pits, I was a little worried there. If we didn't have that lap traffic, I might have been done for.
So I guess this question really goes to both of you guys. Where I think I'm safe in saying that you're pretty far out of the championship hopes. I don't think barring a major setback that you're going to have a chance at this. But obviously, being this kind of late in the season, having this good of run, does it give you momentum going forward the next season? Are you really just going trophy hunting at this point? I mean, what could have changed in this season that gave you a different chance? Obviously, different circumstances for both.
Yeah, I'll say for me, I mean, this was just luck. I mean, I love Homestead. I run really well here. So there's no momentum carrying forward after this race. This was just, it happened to run really well for me.
Yeah, I I absolutely was only going for a win, and he closed the door. If he would have left half of a car width, I think I would have stuck it in there. We're in the same Discord and we're friends, but we're both trying to win. So I think there could have been some wheel banging. I pretty much always race like that though for the win. I've never done the like let's take it easy or save fuel or anything like that. It's stand on the gas, and rarely does it work out in my favor. But tonight, with it being green the whole way, we were both just kind of checked out, and it was if this would have been a larger field, I think it would have been better because we could add more traffic and made it more problems for him. But I was burning down my right front trying to follow him.
Yeah, I got a question for the both of you as well. I think I'll start with you, Charles. I
Mm.
mean, you talked about the fact that Eric was the rabbit to be able to follow onto pit road. And we've seen here this entire season, it doesn't matter what track we're at, pit road has always seemed to be a key player. We even saw last week a number of drivers have issues with the Kansas pit road. Here tonight, you had the unusual pit road entry where you had to use that access road from the entrance of 3 all the way over to turn 4. And it was interesting watching the two of you because I kind of likened it to where you're trying to do traffic control at a super speedway, trying to get down to that commitment line. Obviously, you're trying to close up that gap, but at the same time, make sure you get that thing down to the 50 miles per hour pit speed. How difficult is it having that extra thing to worry about when you're trying to look down at the telemetry, look at the speed, but also try and manage that gap getting to that line?
It's extremely difficult, and I am probably the worst in iRacing at pitting. So, notoriously, I will screw up almost every single race this season. I feel that I've been in contention, and every single race at some point, Matt, I think you've brought it up many times, where I will make 1 to 2 extraordinarily stupid mistakes. And for whatever reason, I got married last night, and maybe that'll change my luck and make me be a little smarter with my
It
my
doesn't, I
thinking.
promise you.
It didn't the first time. Maybe this time it will. But yeah, I was extraordinarily fortunate on the pitting because Eric is a very good pit stop person, but I think he was being extra cautious going in, and it allowed me to really send it in there. I think otherwise, if I didn't have that advantage, he would have probably beat me by 2.5 seconds in the race. So yeah,
So
it
was
was.
that the case? So was that the case, Eric? Were you being a little bit more cautious, or were you keeping an eye on that 50 closing in on you there at that commitment line?
No, I was definitely being cautious. During practice, I was trying to figure out exactly how to pit on this track. And I love coming in 3. 3 I love doing, but once you get around the corner right before the line, I couldn't find my braking point. So in the race, I had to be extra cautious. And fortunately, Teed and I pulled a really big gap on everybody else, so I didn't have to be perfect. I just had to be in front of Teed. So I could be cautious, lose a couple seconds to everybody else as long as Teed stayed behind me.
You guys certainly made it very interesting there in the closing stages with that final pit stop, but great runs for both of you. Eric obviously snapping a winless streak as we documented going back to the early portion of last year. Charles, a great run for you here tonight, getting some really good points as well. Great run for both of you guys. Going to be a lot of fun to see if you guys can now carry this momentum into the final few races of the season. Before we let you go, Charles, we'll start with you, and then we'll move to Eric. Give you guys the opportunity here to do some thank you sponsors and shout outs.
Thank you guys for putting this together. We got to get the car count back up next season, and we're going to do all we can to do that. But thank you guys for doing the broadcast for us. I want to give a shout out to Jim Brooks, who's been battling cancer, and hopefully he's doing well tonight. Maybe he gets a chance to watch this. I would love to have him out here running with us when he's feeling up to it. I know he ran once with us last week, but thanks to all you guys for putting this on. Thanks to all the folks that are sponsors. I can't even remember them anymore. I haven't been on a podium in so long. I forgot. If we ran half the length of these races, I'd probably have 3 or 4 podiums. But this might be the first one this year. I can't even remember. But
I think it is.
most importantly, I want to say it was really fun racing Eric that hard for in my hand. I didn't realize until I let go of the wheel how freaking sore my damn hand was. Just pressing to try and go get the guy, and he does not make mistakes. He's a fantastic driver. So it's always fun to race. I mean, that has since I started on iRacing. Eric is a great person that shares his tricks and tips, and really fun to race with him and Craig alike.
Yeah, same for me. Thanks to you guys for the broadcast, and Teed and Eric and all the other admins that put out this league. It's always been a blast. I love racing these guys. And yeah, thanks to all the people watching, and we appreciate it.
Well, Eric Schaus, Charles T, putting on a show for the fans here tonight. They ran 1-2 pretty much the entirety of the race and bring it home in first and second. Schaus and Victory Lane teed with the runner-up finish here tonight. Congratulations to you both, and again, best of luck next week and the remainder of this season heading towards Indy.
Thanks, boys.
Thanks.
And that is here tonight to a close from the Homestead Miami Speedway. Just a little fact check, that is actually Charles Teed's second podium finish this season. Third back at the New Hampshire Motor Speedway, but it is his best finish of the season here tonight at Homestead. And again, for Eric Schaus, his best finish since back in April of 2021. Point standings have been updated. Matt, as you alluded to the situation for Jeff Highsong, the gap, though, between Craig Forsyth and Rick Gravon, I guess this is why I'm not paid to do the calculations, because it's not 1 point. It stayed at 3 points between the two of them. There were some no incident points that came into play as well that I didn't realize were bonus points that drivers could get. So 3 points still, the separation between the two. And we saw what they were doing here tonight, mixing it up for the 5th position. I can only imagine what's going to be happening down this home stretch when it comes down between these two guys with checkered flags on the line.
Yeah, realistically, Craig Forsyth is doing all he needs to do right now, where he's just making sure he finishes ahead of Ravon and keeps the car clean and just brings home as many points as he possibly can. Rick Ravon, though, is in a little bit more of a precarious situation since he needs as many points as he can get, and obviously to finish ahead of Forsyth. So the big thing why Rick Ravon, if he misses the intended race he plans to miss, the big thing for Forsyth is he really needs to capitalize in that race. He needs to go out and win. He needs to go out and finish P2, P3 as high as he can, just to get as many points as a buffer. Since again, we saw, I mean, Jeff Highsong is one of those guys who is slowly starting to claw his way back, and you don't want to leave them within range when we get to one of these tracks like Indy of, hey, if realistically, if let's say Highsong gets within 50 points, he can go and win Indy, and he could easily take the championship and the win.
So Highsong starting to chip away. Luis Gonzalez Nunez, a solid run here tonight in 4th, also in that same vicinity with Highsong, Forsyth, and Ravon. He's been good at the shorter tracks here this season. New Hampshire and Milwaukee Mile, he's been in Victory Lane. Next week we go to the shortest track on the schedule, 0.875 miles at Iowa Speedway. Is this a place where Luis Gonzalez Nunez has to capitalize to get himself back in that championship hunt?
Yeah, Luis has been pretty much on fire at all the short tracks all season. So this is one of his points where he really needs to go and show up. But also, it's kind of that same thing where he's going to need a little bit of luck out of this one, too. Now, Luis hasn't fallen out that far to the point where I'd really write him off, but he hasn't really stayed close where he's been great on the short tracks. When we come to the 1.5 miles, he just has not been as prevalent. So when I look at Luis Gonzalez Nunez, he has to go out and win this race. And realistically, Craig Forsyth and Rick Ravon, they need to have a bad day.
And of course, we'll be focusing on those battles inside of the top 2, top 3, top 4 in the point standings. But we also have to keep in mind, you've got those drivers out there. They're just trying to finish out the season with a victory. And we've got a former winner at Iowa next week that finished runner-up here tonight in Charles Teed. So you got to think that he's certainly going to be at the forefront of the running order when the green flag drops next week. But that's going to do it here tonight from the Homestead Miami Speedway. Eric Schaus, your winner here in Florida, his first victory of the season. The points remain close heading into Iowa next week, and we'll be bringing you coverage of that next Sunday night with the green flag scheduled to fly at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Good, clean race here tonight, Matt, with strategy, a lot of swapping of positions there late inside of the podium, top 5 all the way back through the remainder of the field, and going to be a lot of fun to watch this down the home stretch. Appreciate you joining the booth here tonight.
100%, always fun.
And thanks once again to everyone that tuned in here tonight. Hope you guys enjoyed our coverage, and we will see you guys next week for the continuation of the Dark Horse Racing Series presented by Troy Lee Designs. For Matthew Rodriguez, I'm Seth Cole. We'll see you guys next week at Iowa as you've been watching another broadcast courtesy of FRN, the Flatout Racing Network.
This broadcast is the copyrighted work of Flatout Racing Network and may not be rebroadcast, retranslated, or used in any form without the express written consent of Flatout Racing Network and iRacing.com Motorsports Simulations. Flatout Racing Network would like to thank you for your support, and we hope you enjoyed tonight's broadcast.